Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host, and we have a very interesting show tonight. We have Julie Olson coming up. She had a 1982 encounter we're going to be talking about, and she actually has some debris. We're going to be talking about that. She has it. She's going to be able to show that, and I have pictures of that as well. Just want to get something out of the way. A sad thing, we lost a great contributor to the UFO world, and that's Robbie Graham. He passed away a couple of days ago, unfortunately. So if you have not heard that, I wanted to let people know, listeners know, he was a past guest on this show and will be missed in this world of UFOs. So this week, our blog by Charles Lear is UFO abduction research under the scrutiny at Harvard. And this is about John Mack, of course. And it's another great blog. Again, these are made into audio blogs that go out on our podcast feed, or they actually go out as a video on YouTube as well. So I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. And without further ado, I'm bringing in our guest. By the way, I do want to thank everyone that helps out with the show. I do appreciate that. And here we go. Welcome to the show, Julie.
Hello, everybody.
And I got to say this, you can't help but see what a beautiful property you have behind you. You can right away. I feel like I'm in snow country, and and then I saw you do have like 2 feet of snow coming your way, right? Or is it snowing right now?
Just very lightly coming down. So we're not going to get as much as the cities. Like they're supposed to get like 26, and I think we only got 6 so far. So
yeah,
that's good.
Well, I'm not in snow country right now, and I'm not really missing it. So, but I may someday, but right now I don't think I'm going to miss snow for a while.
I like the winter, but I'm ready for spring and summer now. Bonfires. Yeah. I'm ready.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I had one of my listeners mentioned you, and I tracked it down and listened to an interview with you and thought you had a very interesting story. Not only that, but it continues on. So I'd like for you, if you would, let's start out by you telling the story as it happened back in 1982, if you would.
Sure. 1982, I just turned 18, November 26. I still lived at home, and I lived in a real rural area of Minnesota. A lot of people probably watching are familiar with Minnesota, but I lived in a pretty rural area. Stillwater, Mahtomedi, Willernie is just a little town. It was like the population when I was 18 was 400, from what I reflected back to. Yeah, it was very small. And I lived in a house that was built in 1900, a real old home. And we had ponds that surrounded our house. And then on the right side of our house, we had the backwaters of a lake called Washington Lake. And I will go right into what my mother and I and my stepfather witnessed. And it was February 10th of 1982. And again, I was 18 years old. And my parents were actually going through a divorce at this time. And Rolland, we'll just call him Rolland, my stepfather. Anyway, he had about another week to be in the house before he had to actually leave when the divorce would be final. So anyway, my mother and I, and I'm from a family of, I have 3 brothers and 2 sisters, and I'm the middle child. And the February 10th of 1982, we had a 4-bedroom house, and my bedroom was in the hallway. So I didn't have a bedroom. I slept out in the hallway on a little bed. I didn't have a dresser or anything. But my sisters were gone, and I got to sleep in their room that night. And my parents were going through a divorce, and my mother and I slept in a room that neither one of us have ever slept in. And that, to me, too, was like a sign from what I'm about to tell you. So anyway, it was about midnight, and in the bedroom. So the bed was up against the wall and there was 2 windows, and I wasn't facing the windows and neither was my mother. And it was around midnight. And like if somebody came into a room and turned on a light, you would know that, right? You're like, oh, somebody
Yeah.
just light switch. That's what I thought. Because I think we went up to bed about like 10:30, somewhere around there. So, but anyway, I thought someone turned on a light switch and I opened my eyes and the whole room was neon lime green, not like just a beam coming in. The whole room was lit up green. And it was just like, oh my gosh, what is this? I mean, I knew it wasn't a car going by and again, I'm in a very rural area. So I turned and I kneeled on the bed and I looked out the window, and our house was on a little hill. I mean, not a big hill, but just like a little hill. And on the bottom of the hill, we had a street light in our yard. And so when I'm looking out the window, kneeling on the bed, I can see a long cigar-shaped object about 40 feet long hovering. So like down below where the hill is and the street light, if you would add one more street light on there, that's about how low this was. So, and I didn't have to say anything to my mother because I just kind of like gave her a little nudge, and my mother got up and she walked to the edge of the bed and she looked out the window, and I'm kneeling on the bed looking out the window at this 40-foot long lime green cigar light just hovering. And I mean, it wasn't just like this. I mean, it had like a little bit of a bounce to it. And my mother's standing there and she looks out the window, and her first words, and this is even in the newspaper, her first words were, "Oh my God, Julie, it's the second coming of the Lord," because it was so majestic. It was so beautiful. Was it scary? There were so many emotions in just looking at it. You were froze. Were you scared? No, I mean, there was just so many things, but that's what she thought. And we just stared at it. Mm-hmm. So as we're staring at this, then all of a sudden it lowers. Now it's lowered below the street light, and it's about like 6 feet off the ground. And again, we're upstairs. We're looking out a second floor bedroom window, facing the street light, facing this whole object. So we can see that we're watching it drop down. Then we watched it shoot up, and as it shot out, well, first I'm going to tell you about this light. The lime green light, like I looked inside there, and this wasn't a blinding light. Like you could look at this light. You didn't have to go like, oh my gosh. Yes, it was bright, but you could look at it and it didn't hurt your eyes. Mm-hmm. And within the light, within the cigar-shaped light, I looked inside there to see if I could see anything, like if there was any movement in there, if there was anything dark in there. I couldn't. It was just one solid light. And so as this lowered and then lifted, it shot, you're not going to believe this, but this is exactly what happened. It shot down fireballs. Like all these fireballs came out from like the craft. They didn't come straight down. They came out at like out of the sides because the way they came down. And so they had a tail on them, but they shot down. And you got to remember, this is February 10th. This is Willernie, Minnesota. And even in my, we had a lot of snow. This is me and my mother, but we had about 2 feet of snow. And this is one of the pieces here that shot down, that wasn't disturbed. But anyway, so this is the next morning, but let's get back to the night when this lifted and shot down those fireballs. They went all over into like the snowbanks across the road and everything. And now they're glowing. There's these glowing embers all over. And after that lifted, it shot off at like an 80-degree angle. Within 1, 2, 3 seconds, it was gone. So now I wish I was outside, but now we're just still looking out the window. This is gone. And we can see all these embers burning in the snowbanks across the street, in our yard. And they stayed glowing for at least 15, 20 seconds. And Rollin, I was telling you, my parents were going through a divorce. So he was downstairs and we could hear him yelling, "June, get down here. There's a UFO, June." He's just down there screaming because he was watching it below us. We were in the upstairs, and below us, he was watching it from the patio window. So he's standing below us, looking out the patio window. We're seeing the same things, but we're up here and he's down here. So anyway, so we watched this burn out, and then we ran downstairs, and I got on a jacket, and I wanted to know what that was out there. So I went out, and Roland did tell me, he said, Julie, I think you should get back in here because we don't know if they're radioactive. So, but I just wanted to get out there and take a peek, and I did get close to one, but I mean, it was already burnt out, but you could see. And again, this is probably, like 12:30 now, 12:20, whatever. So we had to wait for morning, to come for things to get brighter so we could go out there. So yeah, that night, none of us went to bed. My mom called her sisters. We called the police. We called the neighbors. I mean, it was really something to see.
So what happened when you called the police?
I actually just, when I was writing my book too, I did call the Washington County Police Department and see if they had any archive or anything like that, because our road got roped off, and this was 1982, and it's 39, 40 years ago, but I can't remember who roped off our road the next morning. Like they blocked off the road so you couldn't drive there, drive through it. But you could go around our house. We had a side road, and you could use that road. So I don't know if it was Robert Engberg from CUFOS that roped off the road. I don't know if it was the police department. I just can't recall that. And I wish I could tell you who roped it off, but it did get, blocked off.
Did they come out that night though to talk to anyone, or did they actually physically come to the house? The police I'm talking about.
Yeah, they didn't come to the house till my mom. Well, this happened around midnight, and I think they came. It was like about 5, 6 in the morning that they came to the house. But again, I tried to get a report on that, and there just wasn't one. So, but then the next day, Robert Engberg from CUFOS came to our house, and we actually gave him a piece, and also the University of Minnesota came to our house, and they took 2 pieces, and they were going to analyze it. In fact, that's in the paper. Did you have that article that I gave you about that?
This right? No,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, and on here also it says downstairs, Ron, Julie's brother, had also seen the fire, the fireballs. It wasn't, my father's name was Roland. So that was supposed to be downstairs, Ron. It should have said Roland, Julie's father. So, but that's just an error there. That's not a big deal.
Yeah.
But yeah, the University of Minnesota took some pieces, and then they couldn't analyze it. So the University of Minnesota sent the pieces off to CUFOS in Chicago, Illinois. Yes, that piece there that you're showing, that's the one that Robert Engberg from CUFOS and MUFON, he worked for both of them. He took that one from my mother and I, and he was going to have it analyzed. And unfortunately, we never heard from him again. We never heard from, like, the University of Minnesota sent the 2 pictures, or the 2 pieces that they couldn't identify. They sent those to CUFOS. We never heard back from CUFOS. It was like our pieces just were gone. My mother also wrote a letter to CUFOS, Center for UFO Studies, is what CUFOS.
Yep.
Yeah, Center for UFO Studies. But my mother wrote a letter to them. So this happened in February 10th, 1982. And my mother wrote a letter to them right here.
Oh, let me hang on.
You can't see
there
it.
you go. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is the original letter. She wrote to them in March of 1982, pleading with them. And I have this in my book, to whom it may concern, where are the pieces that were sent to you from the University of Minnesota? Where is Robert Engberg? And as God is my witness, this is what me and my daughter seen. And I mean, I could read her letter to you.
No, that's okay.
Like I said, it's in my book.
Yeah.
So anyway, they never responded even in March of 1982. It was just like, okay, so all this happened. It was so exciting. It was so majestic. It was so mind-blowing. And here we're entrusting our pieces to people, such as MUFON, CUFOS, whatever, and we just don't hear from anybody. And then the story just kind of slowly fizzled out.
Now, before we go on from this point here, I wanted to ask you a couple of things.
Sure.
What was the reaction like locally? Was this in the papers? Besides that, did it go more broadly, or was it just, did it stay like a regional story? Do you know?
Earlier that evening, there was sightings on Bald Eagle Lake that they saw this lime green cigar-shaped light too. And it's now that my book is out, my book just came out September of 2022. Now the neighbors, like people that I just went down to my town, Willernie, and I stopped in at the to talk to a few of the locals, and there's so many people that are coming up to me and saying, Julie, I remembered when this happened, and I seen this, and and your story's true, and this and that. And then a lady yesterday, she's a realtor. My oldest daughter works for Edina Realty, and she's a realtor. And her friend, I'll just say her name, Pam, but I'm not going to say her last name. But she just reached out to me, and I'm 59, and Pam is 61. And I actually talked to her yesterday and this morning. And she said she read my book. It's mind blowing, and that her and her husband witnessed. She said there's something about the Willernie area because there was a lot of UFO sightings and stories, and her and her husband actually seen one very close. It was V-shaped, and it was like in 1978 or 79. So she was telling me about that too. So I'm talking to people now that have are sharing things with me. So, and I think if this story what happened with me and my mother, at our house in my little town of Willernie in 1982, I think if this happened today, the news would be all over it. I mean, it would get so much more attention. But back then, yeah, I got teased, like, oh yeah, Julie Olson saw a UFO, or, there was whispers, there was this and that, but it didn't matter to me because I know what I seen, and I actually have pieces of it. So, and then in my book too, Angie, and I'll leave her last name out of it, but she's in my book. She was coming home from work after midnight also, and she lives right behind me back then. And she had to pull her car over, and they were right by her car. And she says there was two of them. So, but she pulled her car over, and she said that she watched as it almost looked like the woods were going to be on fire, because when this craft rose and it shot out those fireballs, you could see the horizon from the trees, and it looked like there was going to be a massive fire. And I always ask myself too sometimes, what if this would have happened in the summer? Because I'm around, all those ponds, and, if those fireballs shot down in the summer, there would have been a fire, but this was winter, and it burned those holes, those rings, like 4 or 5 inches deep into the snow. That's how hot those were.
Wow.
So I mean, this was a huge display. This was the silhouette of this. You wouldn't even believe. You would swear, yeah, that's one we left undisturbed, because, and that was my idea. I told my mother, I said, because she was going to scoop it up, and how we got these things out of the snow. We had 2 wood stoves that's how we heated our house. We were old school, and we just burned wood to heat the house. And so we took 2 of the shovels from the wood stove fireplaces, and we went out and scooped those up, and we put them on a plate. And I don't know if you have that picture too. So yeah.
Let me look through.
I
have these pictures here, but you actually have the objects, or you have one of the objects that you were able to retrieve. And I want to, of course, we're going to be talking about that as well. You have what I'm showing here, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So why don't you, if you don't mind, actually hold it up to the camera?
I will do that, but I want to tell you something about this piece. So this was our full and intact piece, right? And this is the one that we entrusted Robert with, and he works with CUFOS and MUFON. This is all documented. And so when Robert took this and said he was going to have it analyzed, and I remember when I was 18, this is the box he put it in. And it even says his name on it, Robert Engberg, right?
Yep.
This is the box. So, And so Robert takes us in 1982. We don't see him. Remember I told you my mother wrote the letter to CUFOS?
Yeah.
And when MUFON, how this whole story got rekindled is MUFON wrote me a letter December of 2019. I get it in my mail. And they said, are you the girl from 1982 that witnessed this sighting? And I said, I am that girl. And I reached out to MUFON. And then I was telling them that we never did get any of our pieces back. And they were never tested. It just like the whole story just fizzled out. So they said, well, let me check into CUFOS and write them a letter and see if they have your pieces or any record of it, any of this. So a letter was written to CUFOS, and then we got the letter back, or they got a response, and they said, we do not have any record of getting any pieces from the University of Minnesota or anything. However, we do have your mother's letter on file from 1982. Why would they have my mother's letter on file but not have any of our pieces, right?
Right.
So on that letter, and they got a copy of that letter, and MUFON sent that to me, and that's how I found out. I'm like, that was it, because I couldn't remember this guy's name, Robert Engberg. I met him one time, but his letter was his name was on my mother's letter, because on the bottom of it, and that's how I found his name. And it took me like 3 months to find him. And I finally I tracked Robert down, and I said, I need my piece back. I said, you know, what happened? And I told him I was dealing with Jacques Vallée and Paula Harris. And he's like, how do you know them? Well, just a long story. Anyway, Robert found my piece, and we met June of 2021 in Mora at a diner. And he gave me back my piece. He apologized to me, and he even gave me a letter of transmittal. And I have that right here. This is all in my book, saying that he returned the piece back to me since 1982. So here's his proof, their letter of transmittal transfer, that he gave it back to me. So at the diner, when he pulled this box out, and I was sitting there, and he took the cap off, the box top off, and he set it right in front of me, I started crying, because I have not seen this piece for 39 years. And to me, this was like a human connection. I say what you want. I literally sobbed over this piece. It was gone from me for that long. It's something my mother and I witnessed together. It was so miraculous, and I got this back. And to me, that this is just, you can't replace this ever. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's how I got that piece back. And I will show you, I'm going to put a glove on here. I'll show you what it looks like. And Martin, I told you that it's growing. It's growing. It's been in this box for 40 years, and it's growing some type of silver, metallic. I shouldn't even be touching it. Yeah. But do you see?
I do see it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it doesn't have a smell or anything.
It wasn't like stored in somewhere damp or anything like that you're aware of.
Nope. And he had it in a safe.
So let me ask, as you're showing this piece.
Yeah.
Did he say anything about any analysis of whatever the material is?
Basically, he apologized to me. He said he never had it tested. And basically, he said, I mean, he didn't come out and say it, but he kind of, like being selfish, he was just going to keep it for himself. And I told him, hey, I get it, whatever. But at least now I've got this back. And he apologized, and we became friends. We talked for, oh my gosh, I talked to him at least a few times a week, and he was really happy that I had it back. And then unfortunately, to tell you this, I got this back in June, and then 3 months later, Robert passed away. He died of a sudden heart attack. So that was really sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But here, amazing that your timing was prior to that.
Oh,
there it is right there. No, your gloves.
Yeah, my gloves are camouflaging it. I got to take, I couldn't find a rubber glove, and I got to get some more, but I'll just have to wash my hands. I got to be very delicate with this.
Yeah. So there it is right there. Turn it right around. Keep turning it right around. And it shows, you can obviously see that it was, burned Looks like it was burned from the inside. And those of you who are listening to this in audio only, I will have pictures of this, but the video itself on YouTube and Facebook, etc., does show her handling this piece. But you will see pictures in the show notes if you just follow that. So there it is. And what are the plans with this material at this point?
Well, it's not going to be anything cheap to get tested. You know what I mean?
I've heard that.
Yeah.
I've heard that, yeah.
I've heard it could be thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars because it just has to go through the test. And I may hold the Holy Grail, you know, and I'm the type of person, yeah, I have a connection with this because it was gone off all those years for me. And to me, it has sentimental value to it. But I would like the world to know what this is. And I would be willing to put it into a university, or, I mean, I would like the world to know what this is. And I would be willing to give that up to just so people could learn or know what this is. You know, maybe it's from the government. We don't know. I don't know what this is.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, you know, I'd like to suggest, and we can do this offline, but I mean, I know, for instance, Gary Nolan is not a metallurgist. He's not, but he's a scientist with connections and someone that you can absolutely trust. And I think that would be, I mean, I can talk to this offline, but I connect you two together. And I think that might be a way to get this, at least the ball rolling on this, because I understand you're correct in your assumption that it's very expensive. And I know that stops a lot of people from doing a lot of things similar. But this, like you said, if this is the Holy Grail, if this actually, you saw this actually come out of a very strange unknown object, then I really think that the world needs to know,
Exactly.
at least if this is something off planet, or, you know, maybe it's something that, like you said, maybe it's something that can be explained in some experimental. It'd be hard to imagine the 1982 experimental thing that could do exactly what you're discussing. But did you hear any types of noise at all? Any humming, anything at all?
Now it's winter. Our windows are closed, you know, it's winter. But I didn't hear a thing. And even Angie, she said that when she pulled her car over, she had her window down just a little bit. She said she didn't hear. I mean, there was no noise to this.
Yeah.
So, and then I had many neighbors that seen this, Mr. Steiner, Mrs. Mahoney, and of course they're all passed away because they were elderly, you know, then. But I mean, there was a half a dozen witnesses. So I mean, and then my mother and I and Roland and yeah. So
and I'm going to ask a couple of questions that have popped up, and if anyone would like to ask any questions, please do put them in caps. So did all the objects look very similar to this?
Yes. This one is intact. It's whole. And what do I say by that? It's whole. It's not broken. I mean, it's intact. The other pieces are black charred, but you can tell that they're round and that they got so hot that they literally did not have the shape of the circle. I mean, you can tell that they were so hot they like almost broke. So They're like half round pieces, and they're literally black and charred all the way through, inside and out.
So it looked from the looks of things, when these things shot down into the snow, it looked like whatever it was like burning up. Do I have that right?
The light itself didn't burn up. I mean, it was nothing like that. It just, the fire came from underneath. But remember I told you how it first hovered? And then it went down really low, about 6 feet off the ground. Yeah. And then when it lifted back up, it kind of did a little, like a bounce, just like that. But then it shot up fast. And then all of a sudden how can a lime green light, solid light, shoot out fireballs? And I'm talking, these fireballs were big. And they had a tail on them. I'm telling you, they were round and they had a tail. And they came down so hard and they hit the snow all over. And these are the embers that were left burning. So,
and I did see other pictures. I was trying to find them. I don't have them. You may have one right there of the ones that were in pieces. Do you have a picture of those?
Oh, yes. I think I have it on me.
But they were all it seems like they're all parts and pieces of something very similar.
Right. Do you see this picture? That is my mother. But see how much snow we had? I took a picture of my mother. She was outside with a shovel in her hand, and she was looking for pieces, that were burning on the side of the road. We were looking for debris the next morning.
Yeah.
So that just goes to show how much snow we had.
And yes, and you said it looked like 5 or so that were. There's the plates, right? The plate with them right there. Yeah.
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 They are.
So you're saying there were like 5 of them or so. Did you retrieve all 5 of what you saw shoot down or not?
We got it. We probably, on this plate, we had more, but the University of Minnesota, I can't remember. Did we give them 2? Did we give them 1? I can't remember. And then Robert had this one, but I want to tell you something too and I don't understand. Have you ever, they say that men in black come around after something like this happens, right? Okay. Yep. So Paula, Desta, they said, Julie, why didn't you put that in your book? I said, because I don't recall. Okay. 2 or 3 days after this happened, 2 guys showed up at our door, and they had the long coats on, and they had those rubber shoes, that you zip to put your, and chiseled faces. Sunglasses, knocked on our door. My mother let them in. And the story is my mom's sister, who's still alive today. In fact, she just published a book herself, not on the UFO, just something else. But these guys were let into our house, and they did an interview with my mother, with me, and my stepfather. I remember these guys, and I remember them coming to the door, and I remember them coming in, but I don't remember the interview. And I can't, no matter how much I've tried to lay down and think about it, I can't remember the interview that they talked to us all separate. So I never put that part in my book. But I think it's something very important. And but my mom's sister, Clarine, she we just did a Zoom with her, and she said, yes, Julie. And she talked to Desta. She said, yes, those men came to your house. They interviewed your mother, your father, you, and she remembers all of it like it was yesterday because my mom's sister.
Did they identify themselves as from some type of organization?
I do remember them giving us a card, and I don't know whatever happened to that card. I don't ever remember whatever happened to them. But yeah. I don't understand why I don't remember that part. I remember them coming, knocking on the door, coming in. This is the God's honest truth, but I don't remember anything after that. Nothing. Mm-hmm. And so I left that part out of my book because what am I going to write about? Yeah, they came to the door, they came in, and there's really nothing to write about. But I probably should have put that in there. So I might write it in the book.
that is interesting. So MUFON had this and CUFOS. They both knew about it. And how did you know how to contact them? Because I'm thinking 1982. Who gave you the advice to contact? Do you remember MUFON or CUFOS?
Well, when we had the sighting and we had these pieces, let's see, the paper, Joseph Tui from the paper, actually, we didn't even call the newspaper. The newspaper called us because there was a sighting on Bald Eagle Lake. So I know Joseph Tui, and he's now passed away too, but he came over to our house and he took pictures and interviewed my mother and I and all that. Shortly after, CUFOS came, Robert Engberg, and I don't know how he got there, who sent him, maybe when we called the police or maybe when we called the University of Minnesota, how we got hooked up with Robert, I don't know. But obviously, Robert was there because he took my piece and he gave me back the letter of transmittal, and he's on my mother's letter that she wrote. So how did Robert from CUFOS, MUFON, come into this picture? I can't answer that. But obviously the word was out there, I mean, you're talking 1982. So, I've got a pretty good memory, but I can't remember all the little details.
No, I know if I tried to think of things back then, it would be really tough. Although, something like that in your life is something you remember a lot of details about when something major like that.
Can I interrupt? Magic Cheese Cube says, why not open a GoFundMe and let ufologists who are generally interested to pay for this testing? It's funny that you say that because I just did a podcast too with Billy and Suzanne, and we're talking. They brought that up. They said, Julie, we need to do a GoFundMe page. And so I'm answering your question that was brought up, and that would be a good idea. It really would be, because I'm willing to put this out there for everybody to know what it is. And like I said, is it from extraterrestrial? Is it from the government? I mean, it's either or. But I know what I saw. That was not from, to me, that was not government. There's no way. I mean, but who knows? I mean, I don't know.
Well, not to sound too conspiratorial, but if it were me, if I owned that equipment, if I owned that material and I wanted to have it tested, I would just simply say, I would like to have this piece tested for materials and not give any details about it, just because, if you start saying it could be extraterrestrial, just let them make their analysis. But also, it seems to be that a few people have tried to do this in the past and materials end up missing,
Yes.
kind of like yours.
That's my fear.
So I wouldn't even mention, I would maybe have a friend, bring it to a place and all that stuff, and just cover your bases. That's all I'm saying.
Right. And I want to make sure that whoever is testing this is credible. I mean, I don't want them breaking it up, and you know what I mean? I'm sure you could get some debris or ashes or whatever from it. Or even my other pieces that I have, I would be willing to part with those first, because it's the same thing, and see what those are, because those are a little more, they're burnt all the way through and they're charred. Yep. So I would, so I have plenty to, get tested, but I just got to make sure that it goes into the right hands.
That's right. Right. And this person wants to know, did you have any subsequent sightings or events of high strangeness in your life?
Yes, I did. In my book, Dark Secrets and Hidden Lies, I started journaling and writing because I was talking about my horrific upbringing, very neglected, rejected upbringing. It was horrible. And so when I was 8 years old and my parents were up at the local bar, my brother and I, we were on the bottom bunk, and I don't know who was up on the top bunk. And we lived in a 2-bedroom shack. Literally, we lived in a very, very.
So this is prior to 1982.
Yeah, this was like I was 8 years old, so it was 1972 or so. But I was, it was in the evening, and I was on the bottom bunk next to the wall, and I was singing "Twinkle Twinkle Little Star," and my brother put his hand over my mouth. He quickly put his hand over my mouth, and he said, "Look." And I looked, and in the entryway of our bedroom, there was this small creature, about 4 feet tall, standing there. And I know it wasn't human. And when I was talking with MUFON, they said, Julie, did you ever have any unusual things that happened to you? And Bill McNeff, I don't know if you know Bill McNeff from MUFON.
Mm-mm.
Bill McNeff. In fact, I have our email. It's in the book. Bill asked me, and I asked Bill, I said, can I put this in the book? Because, you can't have your copyright stuff. And he said, Julie, could you draw me a picture of what you remember at 8 years old? So I did.
Right here?
That's what I drew. And I couldn't, because I'm laying on the bottom of the bunk, so I couldn't see past the waist. I didn't see the legs. Because I'm laying down, and this thing is standing in our entryway. So Bill, he said, oh my God, Julie, he said, you didn't draw an alien. And I said, no, I didn't see an alien. I just saw a little creature. And he, oh gosh, do you have
this right here?
Yes. Yeah. So Bill says, Julie, give me a second. So then he sends me this in an email. And this is from 1969, that 2 military guys, they experienced this. And he said, Bill says, you're giving me goosebumps because it looks like exactly what you drew. And I said, when I looked at that, I said, Bill, the picture that Bill just, that you just had up, that was more what I saw than my own drawing. How can that be? the same, you know what I mean? It's eerie. It is just mind blowing, but that's, yeah. And it just stood there, and my brother put his, the blanket over his head, and I locked eyes with it. It had black shiny eyes, and I locked eyes with it. And it was like it was a magnet. And this went on for maybe a minute or so. And then I opened and closed my eyes a few times, and it was gone. So I don't know what that was.
Wow.
And it came. Yeah.
When's the last time you spoke to your brother about that?
Oh gosh. Well, he lives in Missouri somewhere. I'm not really close with him right now.
But did he remember this through the years when you did speak with him?
Yes, absolutely. He even told one of my friends, Mike, that lived in our town. He actually sent me a text message saying that, Ron told me all about this, Julie. He goes, I believe you. Yeah. So absolutely that happened.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, like Bill said, you didn't know.
So this happened prior, and I mean, there was no UFO connection or anything to that. It was just like you saw this being. But so has anything happened since? That's what the last question was. But I mean, has anything happened since this has happened? 1982.
Well, I am no, not anything big to tell you about, but I am now sky watching, and I have never done that. And I have a video of two unusual things, and I've shared it with some reputable people, and they're like, yeah, that's really cool. So I'm doing that now. I'm going out, and I have a perfect spot. I live in northern Minnesota. I'm on a lake. I mean, we just had the northern lights the other night.
Oh, wow. Beautiful.
So I have a lot of beautiful, and another thing too, I want to tell you, Martin, my book, Dark Secrets, Hidden Lies. Do you see the streetlight?
Yeah.
And then I designed this cover, and that's me underneath the streetlight. Okay. Yeah. You got it there.
Yeah.
And that UFO was shining down on me. We saw that when I was in the house looking out the window, but I told you I had a very rough upbringing. And so my book, The Dark Secrets and Hidden Lies, when Rollin would come home from the bar and throw me out of the house in the middle of the night as a young person, I would go sit underneath that street light. And that's the same place where the UFO came. That was like my safe spot beneath the blanket of the stars underneath the street light. But that was my safe spot. And that's where, so I think it just kind of all mirrors and connects.
Wow. Interesting. Now they're getting to the light, the color of the light. It's not totally unheard of. As a matter of fact, I was taking a flight on a commercial flight, and the guy next to me was a pilot for American Airlines, and he was deadheading, and we had a discussion that I asked him if he heard anything. So this is right after December of 2017, when the New York Times article came out about the Pentagon and UFOs. And so I asked him if he happened to catch that. I don't know exactly. I think it had to do with, he was saying he was a Navy pilot. And so he said, no, he did not catch it, but UFOs are real. And I said, oh, tell me why you're saying that. And so he was flying, I think, either an F-16 or something like that. And for about 300 miles, he was tailed by a bright green object that lit up the entire cockpit. And it was, he said it was just a really bright green, and it followed him for, I think he said about 300 miles, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
So you don't hear it a lot, but green is one of the things people talk about, green orbs. I've never heard anyone talk about a green cigar-shaped item, but would you say that this had an overall green hue to it, or was it shining out green lights?
No, it was not shining out any green flashing lights. It was just green, bright, and it had like a like the actual light had, what did you say, like a aura around it? Yeah, it had kind of like that. It had like a little, like a light around it.
That's kind of what I have to say. That's kind of what I saw.
Yeah.
I had a sighting back in 2007, and it was a disc-shaped object, but it had a blue glow all the way around it. It didn't have any lights, but it was sort of twilight at the time. But this thing it wasn't really extremely bright or anything, but it had a blue glow all the way around it, but no lights emanating, off of it.
Nothing flashing. I looked in there. I wanted to see if there was anything like dark in that light, like if you could just, because, you're looking out the window and you're watching this and it's even with you with the street light. And I couldn't make anything out in that light at all. And isn't it weird that, I shouldn't say use the word weird, but for a light like that to shoot out fireballs, it just
I've never heard. I don't think I've ever heard anything like that ever from anyone so far.
I know. I mean, yeah. And and that's exactly what happened. And I don't, like you said, I don't even understand it. How can a light shoot out fireballs and then, leave these debris in the snow? It's just something that I got to witness, and I feel like it was a gift. I really do, with me and my mother, what we went through with all the trauma, and then Rollin, the timing of they're going through the divorce and he was leaving. To my mother and I, it was like finality. It was just like, yeah, this, it was to us, it was a sign. And her and I talked about that. We said it was a sign.
Do you believe that you have complete memory of it, or do you think that there's any missing pieces that you'd like to recover, say in hypnotherapy or something like that?
I've always said this too, and I've told this to Paula. Okay, so this happened at midnight. We went up to bed because I know we watched a movie. There's no way an hour and a half went by, and to me, that happened, happening at midnight. And I know, to me, I feel like that's the time part. Like, I think 12 o'clock came too fast. That's how I always felt. My mom felt that way too. And so I don't know, who knows, but it's just something that it's on in the back of my head, that I always did believe that this happened at like 10:15, 10:30 or whatever. I mean, how did 12 o'clock come that quick? I mean, I couldn't even believe when that happened, that it was after midnight to me.
Well, yeah, this is just someone complimenting you.
Yeah.
That they bought your book, and
yes.
Your strength is extraordinary and all that. So, I believe that, it wouldn't hurt, I'm sure you've heard, if you've been paying attention to a lot of people talking about having sightings, that there's a time issue. A lot of times there's a time issue, whether it's missing time dilation, or I don't even know, there is a time element. There seems to be with a lot of UFO sightings. And sometimes people will say something like, geez, the next thing, I spoke to someone on the phone recently that had quite a sighting. I'm probably going to try to get him on the show in New Mexico. And he's probably going to listen to the show and get back in touch with me. But he had this weird, very, very unusual sighting that started out looking like an animal type of thing, and then it shape-shifted and everything else. It's really bizarre. And then all of a sudden it's, like 3 o'clock in the morning, and they have no idea what happened. So there seems to be a lot of times that people are talking about this, and I don't think it would hurt you to, look into it a little more as far as hypnotherapy or something.
Right. And the clarity of it, so where our house was up on that little hill, there's no houses in front of us. There's no houses on the side of us, but there was a house behind us. So now you're looking out, you have all these ponds in front of you, and you have a lake on your right-hand side. Oh, and another thing, which I thought was unusual, is there was a sighting the same night as mine, and you just had that up, and it said February 10th, 1982, UFO underwater. That's not for me. That's not mine's already recorded, my sighting, but there was another one from February 10th, Willernie, come on, my little town of Willernie, that there was somebody reported a UFO underwater.
Underwater.
Now,
how that in February though, that's in the ice, the lakes are iced over.
Yes,
So
but it's a report that UFO Cat had. I think I thought I gave it to you, but it's in my book. So where did that come from?
I do believe you did. I just didn't. That just didn't get uploaded. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's very strange to be underwater. In, and underwater.
Yeah, I know. And do you see?
Yes, I saw that. Yeah.
No, this is crazy, but this is back then in 1982, we had Northwestern Bell, right? Ma Bell.
Yep.
And my mother saved this, and this is us. It says, save this Northwestern Bell from March 1982, searching for report of whatever became of the full intact ring. Where was it? What happened to the piece? We never got back, but we saved. This is us calling CUFOS in Chicago, Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
My mother saved that because she had everything like in a little photo album. She was so
That's
proud.
She did save everything. Yeah.
She's passed away now, but I mean, I hope she knows that I wrote the book because, and I believe she does, and I believe she was with me when I wrote it. But I mean, it was for something this majestic to happen and then just have your pieces, disappear. And the whole story just gone, but now it's been rekindled, and I'm.
Yep. Well, I'd like to stay in touch with you and follow up about this material because I think it's important to at least have it put in the right hands. And I still think that Gary Nolan would be a good start, and I'm going to reach out to him and also send him a link to this video and the pictures and things like that. And we have just a couple of minutes left. So I guess what I'd like to ask you is where do you go from here on this? Is just besides having the material looked at, are you going to try to keep this story kindled until that gets answered?
I am I like doing the podcast and getting the word out there. And my little town of Willernie, they just had it was so cute. And I found this out after the fact, but they just had a little alien party. I said, you did? And then I guess the old folks that come in there in the morning, they're reading my book to them when they come in and have their coffee. So
oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, that's
and
nice.
Then,
yeah.
And then my brother-in-law was he has a pizza business, and anyway, a guy came out from a realtor office, and he goes, "Hey, is your last name Olson? Because I'm reading this Julie Olson's book right now." And he goes, "And I see her, the last name on the truck, the pizza truck." And my brother-in-law's like, "Oh my gosh, your name is getting out there." He's like, "I might have to start taking the side streets."
Well, thank you so much, Julie. And I'm going to put all these things in the show notes, as I mentioned, to anyone that's listening to the audio. And I'm going to be following up with you. And I will also, if there's ever an answer to this material, we'll talk again and get this out there.
Okay, that sounds great.
All right.
So, yep.
Okay.
Thank you for everything. Yeah, thank you.
You
All
bet.
right,
Thank you very much. Okay.
Yeah, bye.
Bye now. All right, everyone. So next week, I'll be back with Sam Maranto. Thank you all for watching or listening to the show tonight. And we'll see you next week. Remember to keep your eyes to the sky.